systems that put us ahead from birth. So this picture is Elizabeth Eckford, who was 15 years old at the time, and this was the integration of Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. And if you go to Little Rock now, Central High School, it's still there. It's this huge, actually quite architecturally beautiful school. Across the street from Central High School is like a 50s style filling station that they have changed into a museum related to the integration of Central High. So Elizabeth Eckford was one of, I don't remember, nine. How many?
Total 9.
Thank you. The Little Rock 9, right?
1957.
Excellent. Okay, so Elizabeth Eckford, obviously, there were mobs of people. It was known beforehand that this was going to be really ugly. So some of the organizers, or folks from the NAACP, contacted all of the homes of the, I'll say, 8 families, because Elizabeth Eckford's family did not have a telephone, to tell them, we're going to meet in the back of the school to avoid this mess out front. And Elizabeth Eckford did not get the message and showed up to school on her own. And this always really moves me, because I can't imagine being 15 years old and being able to do that. Okay, let's go. All right, so that's a little bit about white privilege. Now I want to talk about a related subject, which is racial microaggressions. So he's a very articulate black man. It's kind of like my mother and her nice black plumber. Let's keep going. All right, so Peggy McIntosh said, as I said earlier, that for the most part, this idea of, the kind of Bull Connor, really aggressive, beat down, spray painted, that kind of racism, there's enough social disapproval that those kind of incidents are more rare in 2017. They still obviously happen, but, right? So, we are now living in an age of what I'll call racism 2.0, like the new operating system. The racism is less overt, it's less in your face, it's much more covert. It's a lot less obvious, it sort of comes through the side door, more disguised, and it's much less publicly displayed than in the past.
I call it casual racism.
Casual racism, yeah. So casual racism is a good term for it. It's been called these other kinds as well. So it's more ambiguous. It's a lot more, I hate to say like ordinary, or rather it happens in ordinary circumstances rather than that kind of circumstance or Elizabeth Eckford. So it's harder to identify and it's harder to acknowledge. And in fact, for the recipients of this kind of racism, oftentimes you're left with this, right? Yeah, go ahead.
And when you are a recipient of it, you are accused, if you decide to bring it to discussion, of playing the race card.
Yes. Why do you always have to make everything black, right? Yeah, so that goes back again to that idea of it's not only the injury of the experience, but it is undercut by the dismissal or denial that it ever happened. It's a chip on your shoulder.
I just want to add, when you talked about Elizabeth Eckford, she's my mentor.
Is she?
Yes, she is. So 2 years ago, I walked with her. She was going through cognitive behavioral therapy. 60 years, and she is still bearing the burden, which is why it's very frustrating to me when we have these conversations and people say, you should be over it. And so she's military, so her her VA doctor said, go back to the site. So I walked with her like 15 times during just like she did the first day
In Little Rock.
in Little Rock, videotaping her. And she still had the same affect as she did 60 years ago. This summer is going to be 60 years of that. So people don't think about the burden. Elizabeth still cannot, to this day, she can't deal with loud noises. When she speaks in auditoriums, the children have to do this to say thank you to her,
Oh,
because she can't deal with any of that. And it's just now that she can share that story without bursting into tears.
Yeah, and I'm sure I don't have to tell you, because you know, but there's actually kind of a really interesting backstory history too of one of the white girls that's prominently
Hazel Mastery.
yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, and their sort of history, which looked a little bit like a reconciliation for a while, but sort of more.
They had a poster that says reconciliation, like at their 40th year anniversary or something. But Elizabeth said, you are not reconciling if you don't recognize what was done. And Hazel, to her, was not reconciling. And I interviewed both of them for my dissertation. And Hazel is the queen of white privilege. You don't want to say, it's not like that was how she was socialized. You get what I'm saying? She had a beautiful home. She had a husband who was taking care of her. Her parents pulled her out of that school because they didn't want her around those people. And every single day, Elizabeth experienced a physical, mental, or vocal assault, even though the National Guard was there. I mean, so all I'm saying is Hazel Mastery, and Hazel says, it wasn't me, it was the girl next, if you go back to that picture,
Right.
it wasn't Hazel, it was the blonde that was next to her that she says was the main person. And so Hazel says, a life is more than a moment. Because she says, I was the one captured in that picture, but it wasn't really me. It was the person, it was her. She was the one who did it, but I was the one who was caught in the picture. When she doesn't even realize that both of them and everybody else who was impacted, who was, for that 14-year-old girl, 15-year-old girl to go to school and see the National Guard there with weapons, soldiers with weapons, preventing her from going to school. And all she was focused on was her new dress that she had made with her sister, that she never wore again.
Yeah, so I mean, it sort of shows the, I think kind of the power of this unearned dominance, that even when someone presents you with a photograph, which should be very black and white, there's still a way to kind of dismiss it or not be able to accept it. Wow. Thank you. Go ahead.
I just want to say, I certainly agree with everything you've said, and the covert or casual racism has been dominant now for a long time. My concern is that we've gone into a 2.50 in the last year or two. There's new things happening, or new old things happening.
Right, so you're saying it's like spiking back up to
Yes.
the,
Yes.
to the bad old days.
I agree with her totally, and I think that, matter of fact, I know most of the time I talk about my age, and I love it because I've been on the planet for 75 years.
So you are not eligible for the essay.
But the power is in our hand. It is in our hand. And the point about it is we have to acknowledge what is going on. Being 75, what is going on now, I've not seen it. The openly racism, the openly, I didn't. It was there, and we knew that it was there, but it wasn't openly and talked about and accepted as it is now. And so, I came up under, 75. where I came from. So, but what is going on now, I've never seen it in my life, the open racism that is going on now. And so,
In
So for
Pensacola,
those that say,
it was
you
going
know,
on 75 years ago.
pardon?
I said in Pensacola, it was going on 75 years ago. Growing up here, I can remember the chauffeur to a prominent businessman being accused of killing that businessman, and the police threw him in jail, and what they did to him was just unbelievable. And when Pensacola High School was integrated, white parents were all out on the lawn the first day. So it's been here. And when you know that you cannot sit down in Woolworths, you have to go to the end of the counter, ask for the black short order cook to make your order, take it, make it, pay to her, and get your bag and leave. To me, that's just as overt as the other kinds of things.
that wasn't what I was saying, William, and I apologize. What I was saying was, I was born in Pensacola too. It was here, I was a part of the marches downtown. What I was saying was, the open racism, they're talking about it. That's the part right now. The hate, it was there, but it wasn't as openly talked about and as open. That's the only thing that I'm saying.
The people have become more emboldened, many have said, sort of since the election. It feels like open season, whereas maybe
Yes,
people
that's
were
what I was saying.
polite before.
Yes,
Can I
yes,
just say
that's what I was
this?
saying.
Sometimes we think that the word has that much more power than the action. So when you are a little girl on the bus and the driver tells your sister, oh, she's too tall to be 4, so she can't ride free, and tells, you know where you gotta sit, and you know this, all these things happening in Pensacola, those actions were just as violent. I feel the same way as the person you spoke about. I cannot, my friends don't understand why I don't use social media. Being a retired university professor, I cannot take the noise of the phone. I cannot take the constant attempt to get into you because I need peace, and I have needed it for over 50 years. And so I guess I just have difficulty. For some people, that might be very much the case, that the action, the bullying, but when I taught at Cornell, I lived near Carl Sagan. I came home one day and nigger was written on my door, on my door to my home. So that's as violent, because you have no idea, all these wealthy, prominent people living around you, and you have to go in and go to bed, and you don't have any clue who did this to you. So for me, there is no distinction. It's just amplification, perhaps.
Yeah, and in fact, the research actually shows that these daily, what you called casual racism, like these daily, ordinary, repetitive assaults, microaggressions, actually have wear people down more than some of those single event traumas that are way more overt.
That's what really I was trying to say, not to dispute.
Whoops. Yeah, oh, whoops, and there it's up there. Yeah, so those experiences, because they happen with such frequency over and over, and because they go unacknowledged, or if you decide to acknowledge them, you're dismissed, that has an incredible, eroding effect upon someone's person. I think I saw you speak. Did you you spoke at UWF a couple of years ago? Did you?
Yes.
Okay, that's where I know you. Okay, so some racial. Sorry, go ahead.
And to your point, they get away with it. That's the problem. They get away with it.
Right. So we're going to talk about some of that a little later too. So more microaggression, clip art sort of stuff. So that awkward moment when someone asks about your tan. I like this, the Asian guy says about the white guy, he was using chopsticks very well, but the white guy says he uses a knife and fork very well. Well, he was born in America, so why would he not? This is a definition of microaggressions. So they are brief, everyday exchanges that send denigrating messages to people of color, because they belong to a minority group. Now, microaggressions, just as privilege and oppression, is not just limited to racial groups. Members of a number of disenfranchised identity categories are exposed to these, but we're really talking about race today. So, this project began at Harvard. The sign says, "No, I will not teach you how to twerk." So this project started at Harvard, where students of color or they would write the microaggression on a blackboard and they would take the photograph. And let me say as well, what about the term people of color? I still haven't figured out the better term, but even the term people of color has a built-in assumption that I don't have a color because I'm white. Like, I'm the business at right. So this is what I mean when this is like knit into institutions' language. So what do you guys speak in Japan? Asian? This is a Latina student and they're telling her, no, you're white. Let's keep going. I never see you as a black girl, Courtney. Let's keep going, and then I have to throw gay stuff in for my people. So who's the man in the relationship? My voice is not the voice of all black people. In other words, the expectation that you're supposed to speak for the experience of, right? We do not put that expectation on white people or members of majority cultures, yet it's frequently experienced by African American folks. Yes, I'm an international student from Canada. Why do you sound white?